everyone, I'm Paige Abbott, and this is your weekly recovery message. This week I thought I would talk about addiction involving sex. I have met a lot of clients who come in and they recognize that they have addiction involving substances. So they're quite clear on the issues that they have with regards to drugs, alcohol, even other behaviors like gambling or spending, eating, that kind of thing. But the area that a lot of people are quite reluctant to explore and quite adamant that they don't have issues in is the area of sex. And what am I referring to when I talk about sex? Well, basically any kind of sexual behavior, including fantasy, viewing of pornography, masturbation, sex with other partners, paid partners, sought out partners. Sex can take a whole variety of different forms. There's no one sort of definition that I'm giving here. And I'm also not saying that sex in and of itself is somehow pathological or dysfunctional or unhealthy. What I am encouraging you to look at is if you recognize that you have addiction involving substances, then the truth of the matter is that you have addiction, which means that your brain regulates itself differently and operates differently. So it's not just specific behaviors that are impacted. Addiction impacts how people think, it impacts memory, it impacts how feelings are processed and dealt with, it impacts motivation, it impacts a whole bunch of different things, and it also does impact all behavior. So I always encourage people to look at how is addiction impacting your life and behaviors rather than if. Again, if you recognize that there is addiction and you're clear, yes, I have addiction involving alcohol or I have addiction involving drugs, then you have addiction and it's not going to be contained and restricted to just one or two areas. Addiction is rooted in the core primal circuitry of the brain, and therefore it is going to have an impact on everything that you do and everywhere that you go, including sexual behavior. So if you move along with that idea of exploring how is addiction impacting sex rather than if, I think you'll set yourself up for a much more realistic and much more healthy framework moving forward. So what are some common ways that addiction can impact the area of sex? Well, fantasy, as I started off by mentioning, is actually, I'd say, probably the most common symptom. And what I mean by that is that the brain gets caught up in finding that dopamine hit or spike through pure fantasy. So nothing even externally needs to happen, but the brain can generate a hit or a high off of that fantasy. So it can be sexual fantasy, but it could also be just a romantic or a love fantasy of, meeting someone, falling in love, kind of the highs of a fantasy relationship. Sometimes the fantasy will take people into the lows and the chaos. So fantasy doesn't always have to be about the high or the good stuff. It can be about the pain as well, because both sides will generate that dopamine hit. Addiction involving sex can start to manifest in some compulsiveness of behavior or acting out. So it may look like viewing pornography or acting out with masturbation for large amounts of time each day, but it may not even be a large amount of time each day, but the result and the impact in people's lives is very similar to what they experience with addiction involving substances. There's more isolation, there's more living in your head rather than connecting to the world around you, there's more avoidance of healthy activities, and there's more of that kind of focus and obsession and compulsion on that behavior. So a lot of time spent ruminating about it, thinking about it, planning about it. Life may still be happening, but it almost feels like you're just going through the motions, checking off the boxes, rather than feeling like you're truly engaging with what's going on around you. Addiction involving sex can also manifest in seeking sexual gratification with partners outside of a committed and loving relationship. So those may be paid partners, Those may also be just neighbors, colleagues, people that you have run into at different events or activities where really there's not a lot of connection. There's generally not even much knowledge about the other person. There's just that desire to act out and find that sense of escape, reward, or relief. And that's the common theme that we're looking for here. When are these behaviors being used for escape, reward, or relief rather than for intimacy, building connection, and for that mutual expression of care and love, which is really what sex is designed for and what we're aiming for in a healthy sexual relationship. If it's being used for that hit, that high, to avoid, for stress relief, to help you sleep, for any kind of symptom management, then that's a huge red flag that addiction involving sex is active rather than that healthy sexual relationship. And the realm of addiction involving sex feels a little bit complicated and a bit overwhelming for folks because unlike with drugs or alcohol, it's pretty unlikely that people will just draw kind of a hard and fast line and say, I'm going to put all of those behaviors into the abstinence category. People generally want to continue moving forward using sex as a part of expression in a healthy relationship, but recognizing that it can also at times be taken over by addiction. And this isn't always just going to be, one time you act out and it's fully generated and determined by addiction, and another time when you're engaging with sex, it feels healthy, connecting, and appropriate. Often it's a mixture. So I've had many clients identify that in one sexual interaction, there's times where they can totally feel their addiction take over and they're just in it for the gratification, for the relief. It feels more selfish, more self-focused. They aren't really paying attention to their partner and what's going on. And then in another moment, it flips and it feels healthier, it feels more connected, they feel engaged. So even just starting to identify these things so you can try and nurture and move in that healthy direction as much as possible would be encouraged. So there's a lot to explore here and there's a lot to learn for each of you. And I really hope that you'll challenge yourself to go into this realm. Again, if you recognize that you have addiction, then you need to start exploring how is addiction manifesting in your sexual world? What are the impacts? How is addiction thinking about sex, feeling about sex, behaving around sex, rather than thinking, nope, that's not an issue for me, and I don't have it. So how is addiction impacting rather than if? And I really do believe that that sets people up for a much healthier recovery journey moving forward, because there's a lot of addiction activity that can lie in these behaviors. So I really hope that you'll give yourself that opportunity to explore this further. I appreciate you watching, and I wish you the best in your ongoing journey of recovery. Bye for now.